Have you ever been out in the desert and seen an animal you couldn't identify behaving in a way that you couldn't explain? Where did the creature come from? I suppose I could ask you the same thing. Where did you come from? Welcome. I'm Thalasma Blue Orb. A heart of metamaterials beats with passion. Inside Rachel Nevada, Empress of Dino Beavers. And this is the Earth. In our previous episode, we interviewed Campbell Morera on his orb experience, which he did not understand as paranormal in nature. And before that, we talked with Matthew Nolan, who saw an orb out of his bedroom window, which he has never been able to explain. In this episode, we will speak with Jeff Knox about an experience he had while on ET Highway. He says that he saw an animal, perhaps related to alleged sightings of a cryptid near Tonopah, doing something that he has never been able to explain. Jeff is a skeptical UFO historian and a member of the UFO History Group. In addition to spending time near Area 51, Skinwalker Ranch, at various UFO conferences, posting daily UFO history stories on Twitter, and providing research and free archival materials in various online venues. We also got to hear in depth about Jeff's personal views on the paranormal and UFOs, his experiences with Mormonism, and his experiences with sleep paralysis, auras, and lucid dreams. We began interacting with Jeff through Twitter last fall, and he and I became mutual cohorts through the UFO community on Twitter. He even listened to The Earth previously as he joined the live chat for the live premiere of our previous episode. He discussed this episode with both me and Campbell Morera, with whom we're both acquainted online, largely through Campbell's work at the Invisible Night School. So we here at The Earth requested an interview with Jeff through social media. Our anonymous student Inter, who is made of clay, conducted an audio interview using Google Voice. It was conducted on April 21st, edited as usual, and left largely intact. I subsequently sent Jeff some follow-up questions via private communication, which he kindly answered. To really get their toes all muddy with this episode, the listener may consider the idea of context. Now, for my purposes here, context is everything in the world that makes any specific action or thing meaningful. It's basically all the whens, wheres, whos, whys, hows, and whats of something. For example, if I were to say hello to you in this recording, it's clear I'd be saying hello to all of the listeners. The context is that this is a podcast. I am the host, and it's been established that I'm speaking to the listeners. So if I say hello to the listeners, this is how they would interpret it. If, on the other hand, someone walked into the room where this recording was playing, and just as I was saying hello, they would not know why I was saying hello, or to whom. They might think I was talking to them. They would not understand the context. Whenever anything ever happens that is meaningful, it happens in an environment of things, after other things and before other things, and because of other things. Context is where something or someone is at, where they came from, and where they're going. So, Hello. For this episode, Jeff will be talking about a number of topics in quick succession. I am treating the entire interview as a personal narrative, so here are the suggested questions to help gently guide your listening, if you like. 1. Do you relate to any of the details in the interview? 2. In what ways do you personally relate to Jeff's account? 3. What parts of Jeff's account do you agree or disagree with, for example? 4. What sorts of context do you find in the interview as a whole?
This call is now being recorded.
Hello.
Hello. Hey.
Hi.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Just making breakfast at 7 at night.
Cool.
That's how I roll. Yeah.
Hot pancakes.
Yep. You know it. Puff pancakes and a little bacon this time, but yeah.
Nice.
Pretty boring. I like to eat the same thing every single day on clockwork.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your experience on the extraterrestrial highway.
Yeah. You want me to just kind of outline what happened?
Well, really, just tell me what happened in as much detail as you can.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was back in the end of June, beginning of July. This was during when they had the storm Area 51, whatever year that was, 2018 or 2019, one of those years. I was driving down to Area 51 on one of my many road trips, and it was probably the late evening, I would guess about 6 to maybe 7 in the evening, and I had turned from Warm Springs onto Extraterrestrial Highway, ET 375, and as you drive down ET Highway for a bit, you pass it's kind of like mountainy area, and on the side of the highway they've got these kind of lakes where kind of water collects. They're different levels depending on what time of day you get there. But as I was driving, I saw something that was kind of whitish, kind of looked like a creature. If you've seen like satyrs from mythology, the legs they've got a knee that bends the right way, but they've also kind of got the like extra long foot that almost looks like a backwards knee. Well, this thing ran in front of my car super fast, and I don't know what it was. It could have been a deer, could have been an antelope, and I just, it's too fast to see. When I was driving, it ran in front of my car. I saw that it looked like it kind of had these whitish legs, and it looked kind of like almost like a backwards bent knee, like it didn't look like a human leg, like not like a human running. And as it got right in front of my car there, it leaped into one of these ponds to the right side of the road. And I immediately had stopped my car. I had my camera already out and going because I film down there all the time. And I looked at the lake to see if I could see what this thing was, because it was very strange. And so I saw in the lake, there was these ripples, as if something had landed in the middle of this lake. And so I waited for something to come out of the lake. Well, nothing came out of the lake. I thought maybe, like I say, it was a deer and it was going to swim out of the lake. Well, I never saw anything come out of the lake. I just saw the ripples. And not only that, it was quite a bit of distance from the road where this thing had leaped to this pond. Now, I don't know how far animals can jump or whatever, but it was a pretty big jump, pretty big leap. And again, I never saw anything come out of it. I had mentioned before on a podcast how I saw the thing about this Tonopah monster, this Tonopah creature people talk about, that I've seen them describe in a fairly similar way to this thing. You know, this tall, lanky thing with these long legs that people claim escaped from Area 51, that hangs out at this abandoned airfield that's, you know, not too far from where I saw this creature. It was a very strange event. It was kind of it was also an event that, it was an interesting, basically 24 hours. I had multiple interesting but not paranormal things occur that night and the next, morning. I saw, right after that event, as I was getting close to Rachel, Nevada, I saw something that looked identical to the famous Phoenix Lights videos. The flare drop of the flares over the mountain. And because I bring a scanner with me, I was able to hear, and I'm usually tuned into the Air Force frequencies when I'm down there. I was able to hear it was an airdrop, but it was still very cool to see it. The following day, I woke up. I tend to camp near the base, the front gate of Area 51. The following day, I'm there, and it's the same day I'm interviewed by a Scripps reporter about Strom Area 51. I have an F-35 that flies right above me, so much so it shakes my car, blows dirt up everywhere. Very fun experience. Again, not paranormal. And I also, I believe it was either that day or the next day, woke up to an earthquake that happened down there near Bakersfield, California, that shook the car. So it was an interesting little trip down there. I'm not sure. I know most of those things aren't paranormal. I don't know what the creature was, but it was probably one of the more exciting events I've had down to the Area 51 area.
There was an earthquake.
Yeah. What?
Was it like a tremor?
Yeah, it could be. You can look it up. This was about July 4th, is when I believe the tremor was. So this was pretty much around July 4th, that summer. And it was big enough that it was on all the news. People in Vegas felt it. It shook up houses and, it was, I had not felt an earthquake out there before. And I don't think they're all that common for Vegas, but at that year, there was an earthquake. And it shook my car. I tend to sleep in a SUV, whatever I'm driving when I'm down there. It's just easier sometimes than setting up a tent. Plus, I believe I mentioned, I drive at night a lot, so that's why I see a lot of things at night. And usually by the time I get somewhere for the night, it's kind of too late to set up anything anyway, so usually just kind of sleep in the back of the car. But yeah, it shook the car, the earthquake, and woke me up. I was like, what is that? I actually ended up driving this, no cell phone service. I ended up driving, to Alamo, Nevada, just so I could get cell phone service to see what that was, and saw it at the gas station. It was on the news all about this earthquake that just happened.
So,
yep.
You said that the deer or the satyr creature that you saw it at around dusk.
Yeah, it was probably, I don't know if dusk is the right word, but it was, it was bright enough that I didn't need to use a flashlight or anything when I got on my car to look at the pond, but it was still late enough in the evening. And this is also an area, because of the mountains and the valleys, it's kind of a darker area in the first place, it gets shaded real easily.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, later in the evening, enough that I could see, but it wasn't bright or daylight. And I mentioned the legs because that's mostly what I saw. If I recall, what happened was I kind of had looked away, I'd looked down, either to the radio or, a phone or something. And I looked up, and all I kind of saw was right when it was in front of the car, and when it leaped, and I just kind of saw the legs. I have no idea kind of what maybe a top or the other half would have looked like. It was more like these like legs, these back legs or whatever they were that I saw leap. And it was just kind of a blur. It was going pretty fast, combined with, basically a split second or whatever observation. But it was strange enough that like I said, I stopped the car to see what was going on, see what it was.
So when you went down to the water, did you see any tracks or anything?
It's kind of hard to get all the way down to the water. There's kind of a side road. The Nevada desert is full of all these little dirt roads, rancher roads, because this is basically, a lot of that land it's either BOM or it's owned by a ranch. There's a pretty big ranch nearby. And there was kind of a side dirt road I could see from the highway. They're calling it a highway. It's not, if anyone's ever been on EP Highway, it's a pretty small, it's like one direction each way. It's just like a small little kind of highway. There's no like off ramp to kind of get onto that little small dirt road that's on the other side of the water. And there's kind of a incline from the road, kind of like a rock, kind of like a steep rock grade down to where the water is. So I didn't check for prints on the other side of the water. I don't think there would have been on the road side of the water, just because, like I said, it was more like a gravel, decline.
Right.
But I saw, there's big ripples in the water right in the middle, as if, something quite large splashed right in the middle of it. But I never saw anything come out of the water.
Jeff later estimated that the distance from the road to the point in the lake where the splash originated was around 100 to 150 feet. He said that he saw the splash from his car and was able to quickly park his car and then go down to the lake in a matter of seconds. According to his account, he judged that whatever he saw couldn't have gotten out of the lake without him seeing it.
So that's why it kind of stuck out to me, and why I still remember it to this day, because it was one of the more odder, unexplainable things. And like I say, unexplainable doesn't mean it was anything. Doesn't mean it was a cryptid or anything. It's just a weird sighting that I had.
Yeah. So have you ever had any other unexplainable experiences, or maybe even just experiences that?
Well, I spend a lot of time, on these road trips I've done pretty extensively for the last, decade, a little over a decade, driving at night. And so I'll see a lot of things that initially will seem weird, that'll trip me up. And this is a point I've made multiple times, that even when what's like in the sky, when what can be causing misidentifications, even if you're an expert, like an astronomer, stuff can still trip you up. Like when they had the Venus-Jupiter, kind of conjunction just a month or so or 2 months ago. Like, I knew that was, Jupiter and Mars or whatever it was. I can't remember at this exact second, but when I saw it, still looked weird. Even last night, I saw something that, was Mars, but it looked so bright, like rays coming off of it. It's easy to get things misidentified, even if you know what they are. And so I've seen quite a few things at night that have tripped me up, that have caused me to stop what I'm doing and investigate them. I'm almost embarrassed to admit it, but I think I spent 3 hours in the desert one night chasing around a light that was probably a parallax illusion. The light probably wasn't moving at all, right? So I was driving late at night, and it just looked like this light was flying through this farm, this field, and just following me as I drove. So I drove probably, 50 plus miles over a couple hours through dirt roads, trying to, like, track down where this light was emanating from, just to discover, it was just a ranch light, on the property. I've seen lights down by, basically again on EP Highway that look exactly like Bob Lazar describes when he took people out there to look for UFOs, this kind of stair-stepping pattern where it's like the light is on, blinks off, and it looks like it's kind of like it stepped up a stair, in the next location. And I've seen that almost every time I'm down there. And again, I tracked it down. There's one of the ranches down there. It's got these lights that like are on this like blinking pattern set up, like this time delay, and it looks like these stair-stepping lights. So I've seen quite a few strange looking things, but nothing that I wasn't really able to come up with a pretty good prosaic explanation. I've also had a daytime kind of thing just here in Portland, but again, what I saw was I was driving and just kind of up high in the sky, it looked like, almost like something silver, kind of reflecting, sun reflecting off something silver. And as I went underneath an overpass, I'm still looking, but the overpass blocked it for a split second. It wasn't there anymore. But in cases like this, it can be a balloon or a distant plane that just happened to reflect off the sun because of the angle it was at that moment, that kind of deal. So I still on a regular basis see things that look strange. I'm just usually, for the most part, able to come up with a prosaic explanation. At this point, I haven't seen anything too strange that I wasn't able to come up with an explanation for. And in many cases, it's the same as other UFO sightings. It's just that it's like a low information zone kind of thing, right? It's a split second sighting, and what can you really do with that? Like, you may not be able to come up 100% with what the cause was, but it was probably something normal. Yeah. And I've been with people as well that have claimed to have UFO sightings. I don't know if you've ever been like Lower Falls Campground, up there, kind of by, not too far from Mount Adams where East Eddy Ranch is, where people say they see UFOs all the time. And I've been out there with friends that will look up and go, that's a UFO, that's a UFO. I'm almost certain it was a satellite. And I've been in group situations at conferences where people are sky watching as well, and they think something's a UFO, and it's almost certainly a satellite. It takes a long time watching the night sky to really just get accustomed to what you see. Even planes, coming into the airport sometimes will look strange because they'll look like they're a solid light that really isn't really moving. Or sometimes it can even appear to be look like it's doing a 90-degree turn. It's not really turning at all, and it's not really a solid light. And you can watch the light for a good 10, 15 minutes. What's happening is you're looking at it kind of head on. And it's far away. It's coming into the airport, but you're kind of looking at it straight on. And so it's not close enough to see the blinking plane lights yet. It's not, and people sometimes look at things like that and say, hey, this is a UFO. Like, if it's a plane, it wouldn't be staying in the same place for so long. Well, it's because it's flying towards you. And I still see stuff like that all the time. Sometimes I try and stop my car to record it on my phone, because I had hoped at one point to make videos of basically IFOs, like the way things can look weird that turn out just to be normal. And anywhere you have an airport, you get sightings like that. Down in Arizona where they have the UFO Congress, same sort of situation. Like, I sat there and watched lights that look almost stationary for quite a long time, but they're just distant planes coming into the Phoenix airport. And as you wait, 10, 15 minutes, and they get closer, then you can start to see the lights, the blinking plane lights and whatnot.
Thank you.
Another question about sort of your experiences in general. Have you ever had visual hallucinations of any kind?
Well, I suffer from severe migraines, and I have since I was a child. When I growing up in the Bay Area, used to actually take me down to UC Berkeley once a month for them to study my migraines. They were so bad. And so I get a lot of like auroras, like migraine auroras, which you could say are kind of hallucinations. I've also had cases where I've had like blood pressure situations where like I've seen things that look like they're in the sky or in front of me, but again, they're more closer to things like migraine auroras. As far as just like blatant open eye visuals, like,
Right.
just not so much. I suffered, like hypnagogic, like hypnagogic, like sleep hallucinations before, like many times.
Mm-hmm.
And I have pretty lucid dreams to the point where they seem like they're totally real, and I feel like I've been teleported, from one place to the next. Like it's not like I'm waking up. It's like I was on the other side of the world. And then like a second later, I'm in my bed and it's like, what the hell? How did I get here? Because it doesn't feel like I was asleep at all. Like according, to my mind, I was awake the entire time. So, I've experienced a lot of really cool things, but that's just my messed up, neurological system.
So when you have sleep paralysis experiences, primarily, do you see things, or do you hear things, or is it both, or?
So I've had both. So I've had quite a few of the classic old Hague kind of phenomenon, where you kind of feel like somebody's sitting on your chest and like you can't move. And I've had this situation where you're half asleep, like you're asleep, but you're still semi-conscious of like your environment around you, where I've seen people like in my room, like standing in the corner of my room or trying to talk, but again, it was like kind of like a half sleep, half awake delusion. So yeah, I've had, both visual and auditory things when I've had these kind of sleep paralysis situations. A lot of the time with the sleep paralysis, I'd also get just this overwhelming like sense of fear. Where it'd feel like somebody's sitting on my chest. I'm unable to move. I want to really move, or I sometimes even kind of feel like I recognize that I'm still half asleep and I just want to like get up and wake up, but like I can't. Like I feel utterly terrified and like I can't move my body. And like there's a heavy weight on top of me, and it just, it almost feels like there's like a presence of evil kind of like in the room, which, is fairly typical sleep paralysis like stuff. I mean, it's no surprise to me people report such things as like, paranormal or alien abduction experiences, because it's a quite terrifying experience and a quite strange experience. I've also had hallucinations, auditory and visual, on cough medicine, when I've been sick and have taken cough medication. But yeah. Yeah, I believe I may have mentioned the story where I once heard something coming from a vent in the floor when I went to the bathroom. And I look in the vent and I see little mice and stuff in top hats and like Victorian gear and canes, like walking down the street talking to each other. It's like, what the hell? And then I went back to bed, and I'm laying in bed, and I'm looking in like the corner of the ceiling. It's like all totally dark. And again, like the same kind of creatures pop up and are walking around talking to each other. It's like in the absence of any other like stimulus, like everything else is quiet, or like you can't see anything because it's dark. It's like your brain fills it in with like these kind of hallucinatory experiences.
So you said your migraines and the auras, how long have you had those for?
Since I was a young child, like back when so I lived in the Bay Area in the 80s. So like I was probably 6 or 7 when, I was in elementary school when I was about first or second grade, is when they would take me to UC Berkeley to study my migraines. So I've kind of had them my entire life. And I later found out in my teenage years that I've got it's called an arachnoid cyst in the center of my brain. It's like about the size of like a large marble or a marble sheeter. That's kind of in the middle of my brain, where if you look at the MRIs, it looks like it's kind of like a cookie bite out of my cerebellum on the imaging. And so I've been seeing a neurologist for decades as well, and that has caused me quite a bit of migraines and nausea and dizziness that I still experience to this day. I get migraines all the time still.
What made you get into UFOs and the paranormal, and can you kind of tell me the story about that?
Yeah, I can't say 100% for sure what like the first thing I watched was. I don't really remember, but it's probably about when I was 8, and I had seen some documentary or TV show. This is when I think it was about 8. I think it was when I still lived in Hayward, California before we moved up here to Oregon. And I'd seen a TV show or a documentary, like I can't remember which one. Thought it was really, really interesting. So I used to, school library had some books on UFOs and paranormal related topics that I had checked out and read, and when I kind of get into a topic, I never do anything half-ass. Kind of go full bore obsessive with it. And so I basically, that got me into UFOs, and in the early and mid 90s, I used to check out like early internet sites, like UFO Mind was a big one. And there things like Glenn Campbell's Desert Rat newsletter, from Area 51. Used to listen to Coast and stuff, at night, sometimes I'd be staying over at a friend's house and we'd be staying up all night listening to Coast. And so I was pretty into it for quite a bit. When I got to about high school, I stepped back from it a bit to focus on other things like girls and Linux and open source software and stuff of that nature. But it was still always something that interested me. I just didn't spend as much time on it. And then about maybe 2006, 2007-ish or so, started to really, really get into it again. Just started reading, like hundreds of UFO books over the, several years, and collecting material and watching all the shows and documentaries I could again. And then I had the opportunity in about 2012-ish, that I just basically started to do it full time. I started to spend all my time on the UFO topic and started traveling around all the conferences pretty extensively all year long and working on research and collecting material. And so yeah, I've been obsessed since I was young, and now it's what I basically do all day, every day. I'm working on UFOs from when I wake up in the morning to when I wake up in the afternoon to when I go to bed, in the morning or night. So yeah, like a lot of people got started when they were young, and sometimes you step away from it for a little bit, but you still have interest, and then you come back, and it's a fascinating topic. And people ask, like, but you're so skeptical, right? So, like, you can't have a real interest in this topic and that's not true. Like, I may be skeptical, but I've had a deep interest in this topic since I was young. I sincerely care about this topic and the research of this topic.
Yeah. Before you saw the deer or whatever it was, or satyr, or cryptid, or whatever, I don't.
And I just say satyr because I'm reminded of the way, like, their legs look kind of strange, you know?
Right, like pointing backwards, kind of.
Yeah.
Did you, like, when you had that experience, how did it change, like, the way that you look at things? And how so?
Not particularly. I mean, like I said, at that point, I didn't always used to be as skeptical of an individual, and my approach on things has changed over the years. Like, on the UFO topic, I used to be pretty nuts and bolts kind of guy. Now I'm not really a nuts and bolts ET kind of guy. So I was already kind of skeptical, and so I wouldn't say it changed me. I'm still not convinced that anything, you know, super unusual, but it was just a weird experience that was enough that it stuck in my mind. And, you know, I've still told the story till this day. And when people ask me if I've seen anything strange, that's probably the strangest thing I've seen, but I still don't know what it is. And I'm not really, like I say, convinced that it is anything really unusual or anomalous. It's just curious and curious. Yeah.
Can you talk more about when you were younger and when you were more into nuts and bolts and aliens and stuff like that? What was that transition like from... My first question is, what did you believe when you were younger, like, say, when you were a kid or a teen, you know, concerning UFOs and aliens?
Well, I've always been pretty scientifically oriented. I used to be, you know, still am very interested in, you know, physics and chemistry and space and all that stuff. And so it seemed to me in the past that, you know, there's just all these, you know, stories people are telling, all these sightings, all these reports. And I used to feel that there's got to be something to that. Like there wouldn't be so many of them unless there was something truly anomalous going on. And because of kind of my scientific grounding, the thing that made the most sense to me was, well, if it's not us, then ET is the best explanation. And to this day, I still kind of feel like if a case isn't a misidentification, psychological aberration, illusion, you know, whatever, and it truly is something that's not earthly, I still believe ET is probably the most likely explanation. And I say that because, at least with extraterrestrials, like, we know life almost certainly exists out there in the universe. You know, the universe is a massive place. Like, so the idea of alien life isn't actually controversial. Now, we also know, at least theoretically, how we could travel interstellar. You know, we know how you can do it slowly, and we at least have theoretical ideas such as warp drive, etc., which there's still a lot of problems with them, how somebody could travel interstellar distances. So I figured, you know, if it is something, at least ET is in the realm of possibility. And so that used to be kind of my go-to hypothesis back in the day and when I was younger. And I was really big on nuts and bolts because I thought you could really solve this topic entirely with like a scientific perspective. Like it would come down 100% to, you know, like instruments and collecting data, and we'll be able to analyze these things and maybe get our hands on a piece of one and do some real studies. But as I got older, I started to study, kind of broaden my horizons, you know, not just in the UFO topic, but outside, and study more things like philosophy and anthropology and archaeology and sociology and other, you know, humanities like topics. And I started to realize that a lot of cases can be looked at in a non-nuts and bolts way, and that's probably the better way to go. And my interest kind of expanded beyond just this nuts and bolts to now I'm fascinated by like the mythological and folklore aspects. Like I'm fascinated with the sociological aspects of this and the psychological aspects of this. I'm fascinated about like the religious aspects of it. So I've kind of just broadened my interest beyond this idea that many people still kind of stick to, that these are non-human craft people are seeing, and there's going to be some sort of physical craft and physical bodies, and I just kind of moved past that. I'm still open to that being a possibility, but I think there's just so much more to this topic now that, as a kid, I didn't really, broach these topics or really get into these topics. Like, I honestly thought a lot of that kind of stuff, I was more like, say, a hard science guy. I thought stuff that wasn't science was kind of woo. Like, I'm ashamed to admit, I even thought topics kind of like anthropology and archaeology and stuff like that was kind of woo back in the day, that it was more theoretical and just people speculating than actual science. Even though I had an interest in the stuff back then. But these days I understand there's a lot of different ways to look at this topic, and honestly, these days it doesn't even really matter to me what, they are. There's so many interesting ways to look at it, to study this topic. It don't really come down to belief. It doesn't have to be about like, I believe they're, non-human intelligence or aliens and so I've kind of moved past the aliens. But that used to be the camp I was kind of firmly in.
Yeah.
At least when I was, a kid and younger.
Mm. Interesting.
And ufology really is just, it's a multidisciplinary field that includes all these things.
Yeah.
It's not just, scientific investigation or whatnot. And there's not just one answer. Like, a lot of people still, like, they're stuck on this idea, like, there's like an answer to, like, the UFO phenomenon. Like, there's some answer to find. Well, there isn't really an answer to find. The phenomenon itself is just basically, people reporting things that are unusual to them or that they can't identify. These things will always have multiple explanations. Some will always be, like, meteorological or astronomical. Some will be, more just storytelling and mythological or folklore. Others will be illusions, visual illusions and stuff like that. And, maybe some end up being alien. But until we have that evidence, I don't think there's really any point kind of adhering to one idea.
Do you think that there are unexplained aerial phenomena in the sense of, not in, like the post-2017 sense, but more in like a Japon sense of ALPs and ball lightning and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I think, and in fact, that could also be an explanation for some of what people see is as yet unknown various aerial phenomena that are caused for whatever causes them, meteorological conditions or, we don't know everything. Science doesn't know everything. And we do discover, new phenomena all the time. Like like sprites, for example, right? Like they thought sprites exist, they had a good idea they existed, but they hadn't really captured them before, it wasn't all that long ago. So there's probably all sorts of as yet unidentified, anomalous phenomena that has an actual natural explanation to it. We just don't know yet.
ever been in the military?
No. Nope. I was basically just went to college, and 9/11 basically happened on TV like a week or two before I was supposed to go up to the University of Washington. But yeah, I never was in the military. And to be honest, like I said, I've had health problems since my late teens. It probably wouldn't have worked out even though I'd wanted to be in the military.
Do you have a religious background? Were you raised religious, or are you religious now?
Yeah. I didn't have a religious background. I grew up Mormon, LDS. My whole family is LDS, basically. I haven't, gone or been active in, probably 2 decades. But, I was active all through basically high school and when I first started going to college. But again, because of my migraines and health issues, I started to kind of miss a lot of church. And again, I also kind of started to, decide that I didn't really need religion personally. I mean, I don't have a problem with religion. I think it is beneficial for a lot of people. It provides structure for their life and whatnot. I just don't feel the need to adhere to one. And again, I'm pretty kind of scientific and materialistic in the sense that, like, I don't really think God probably exists. Kind of, I wouldn't say I'm an atheist. I'm just kind of agnostic. I don't really think there's evidence for that, and I don't really think there's a reason to believe that. But, I might say I'm at least slightly spiritual, but not in like I'm not into the woo and stuff. Like, no offense to people that are, but it's just not me. I don't believe in anything.
You don't believe in anything?
No, I mean, everyone has beliefs, but I'm not sure. If you ask me what I believe, I'm not sure what I actually believe. I just think about that for a while. I try and not, be adherent to beliefs or belief systems. And I'm at least the kind of person that, if I'm wrong about something, like, it doesn't bother me to be wrong about something. Like I realized early on, cause I'm kind of very analytical and direct, and it used to kind of get me in trouble socially, like even back in, high school, when really it wasn't, so like when I was younger, when somebody was like incorrect about something, and it was something I happened to know a lot about, I was the kind of person that would, I guess you could say, like, correct them. But I wasn't trying to be rude or disrespectful. I was just, because it's something I knew about and I knew what they were saying was wrong. As for myself, if I was wrong about something, I actually want to be corrected so I don't continue to make that mistake. But I realized early on that people don't like that. They don't like to be corrected even when they're wrong. I think a lot of people would rather continue persisting to be wrong about something than to have somebody point out to them that they're wrong, right? That's not me. Me, even if I believe something or I think something's true or accurate, I have no problem changing my mind if I'm presented with evidence that shows, that proves the contradictory kind of other side. So I'm not really adherent to any sort of belief, and I have no problem changing my beliefs with evidence and admitting when I'm wrong. If I said something's wrong and you can show me that I was wrong, I'll gladly admit I was wrong. And that's something I've always kind of been proud about, is that I'm not, stuck in what I think. Like, I'm very open to having my mind changed and being presented with evidence. And so if I do have beliefs, I'm open for them to change with new evidence. And I think that's how everyone needs to be. I think they need to be open to evidence. And I think it's also important to question what you believe and why you believe it. And if you should believe it. Like, if you look at why you believe it and it just doesn't hold up anymore, change what you believe. I think questioning your beliefs on a regular basis and really looking at the evidence as to why you believe them is a good trait to have.
Were there particular events that led up to you leaving the church? Like, do you have a specific story about that?
No, not really. I know a lot of people kind of have a story about why they're no longer Mormon, and they go and get themselves removed from the list. And I never did that. I'm probably still on the church roll somewhere. I mean, I never asked to be removed. It was more just that I stopped, attending regularly, because I just didn't, health-wise didn't feel up to going on Sundays. And it got so long that I hadn't gone, and just concurrently, like I say, I stopped really feeling the need to believe in any of that kind of stuff, that I just stopped going. It's more about laziness and just the evolving viewpoint than any sort of specific incident or reason.
Did you ever consider going on a mission?
Oh yeah, I absolutely was going to. I was planning on it. But like I said, what ended up happening with that was I ended up meeting a girl, when I was like a junior and senior in high school, and got really close to her, and we were actually going to get married as soon as she got out of high school. Her parents had even her dad had died, right before I had met her. She's actually the sister of my best friend in high school. And her mom had actually even bought us a house that we were, painting and restoring and getting ready that we were going to live in. But then that relationship kind of fell apart, and I had already decided not to do the mission because of that. So it was in the plans, just didn't do it. I think there's benefits to it. Like, I think it's great how a lot of those guys learn a lot about the culture and the language, and like you come out of that kind of thing with pretty good skill sets, but I did not do one myself.
How do you feel about the Mormon Church now?
Like I said, I think as far as any church goes, I think it's all churches have their problematic history and issues, but I've told other people, like, I'd rather have a friend that's Mormon or a neighbor that's Mormon than an evangelical or something of that nature. Like, you may not agree with what the church believes, but most Mormons, in my experience, tend to be good people, friendly, helpful, kind people. And growing up in the church, it gave me, I think, a good background as far as, being ethical and treating people respectfully and appropriately and being kind. And it still leaves me trying to avoid to swear as much as possible, but I will still swear on occasion. I'm not opposed to the church. I'm aware that there's problematic issues that have arisen, but again, I think all churches have that, and you also can't necessarily blame an entire church, I think, for awful behavior and views of some of its members. So again, I think it's beneficial for some people. I think I enjoyed doing the whole Boy Scout thing and all that stuff, and I had a good time. I don't regret growing up in the church at all.
Yeah. So what was it like for your family? Did your family respond to you leaving the church?
Well, I think I might have upset or disappointed my mom a bit, but at that point, I had an older brother, and he kind of had a lot of his own issues with Asperger's and whatnot and OCD, and so he wasn't really actively going to the church either at that point. And he eventually became Muslim, actually. And it actually, again, like I mentioned, religion provides structure for some people. my brother with his OCD and his Asperger's, which I guess they don't use that word anymore. It's all on the spectrum, but, the whole Muslim praying 5 times a day, whatever, like, it really provides structure and organizes his life for him, where, you know, he might spin out on something else if it wasn't that. And then again, my sister, my younger sister, she does not go to the church either anymore. In fact, she probably does have her own story. She's actually pretty anti-Mormons nowadays. But my mom is still very active, still goes every week, and she lives in Utah now, and the rest of my extended family is still pretty active, like my cousins, you know, went on missions and all that stuff, and my grandparents they're dead now, but yeah, so there's actually pretty much, and my younger brother, he also, you know, doesn't really actively go to the church. I don't know what his views are. I think it's just that he stopped going. You know, some people, it's not that there's something that really pushed them away. Just for whatever reason, they stopped attending, and, you know, it becomes a habit to just not go anymore.
Yeah.
So really, as far as my siblings go, most of them have kind of stepped away from the church, but it's still, my mom is still very active. The rest of my family is. My dad isn't. My dad actually joined the church because of my mom, when they met and got married. And he still kind of stuck with it after they got divorced when I was a kid. But he has a really kind of bizarre story that's just, his story, he's also Muslim now. That's kind of how my brother got into it. But he's not like my brother. He just doesn't really practice it very much. In fact, he only really practices it around my brother. And his reason for leaving the church is one time when he was struggling financially, he went to the Mormon church. They didn't give him any money. He met a Muslim, you know, whatever you call them, imams, or I'm not, to be honest, all that familiar with the religion. And that guy gave him $20. He's like, I can't help you much, but here's $20. And as my dad tells him, that right there was enough to convince me that I should just join his church instead, because he was helpful. It's like, okay, sure, Dad. But, yeah, so he's not really, I wouldn't say he's really active anything anymore, but, he's still, I'd still say he's probably, you know, I still think he has more Christian views than Muslim views. I think his becoming Muslim was practical and temporary, to be honest. I still think he has quite Christian, old-fashioned Christian views. The kind of views someone that was in South Carolina like him would have.
Yeah. So Mormonism, right? It's a really extensive culture in the U.S. In a lot of other countries, but in the U.S. especially, and there's this kind of overlap between Mormonism and UFOs and the disclosure movement. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I mean, anybody that's watched Ancient Aliens knows they bring up Joseph Smith and Mormons, you know, fairly regularly. You know, they interpret if people don't really kind of know about the founding of the church, like there's like a Joseph Smith, you know, so it's called Angel Moroni, right, that kind of directed him or gave him the plates that the Book of Mormon was, you know, translated from. And like ancient astronaut theorists, like, basically interpret that as like an alien visitation where they're giving him. And another thing that's part of kind of Mormonism, and it's kind of a part that really is not even all that mainstream. Like, a lot of Mormons either don't talk about it or they're just unaware. Is like this idea, like the planet, you know, Kolob, that is kind of like the star that's like the throne of God, and how anyone can kind of, you know, we can become gods ourselves, you know, after we die, if we do everything right, and we'll kind of get our own planet, you know, that we'll be God of. And so like this idea of, you know, kind of like other life in the universe and other planets is kind of part of like the Mormon literature. And so I think that makes a lot of Mormons more open to this idea, right, of UFOs and aliens and life in the universe. And I don't know if that had a role in why I became interested in it or not, but you do certainly see there's, you're well aware a lot of the Skinwalker Ranch people are Mormon or Mormon adjacent anyway.
Yeah.
Not just Fugel, but the people that like work there. And there's a lot of that. I don't recall if Joe Firmage is related to Mormons or not. I can't remember, but there's always been quite a few people, and Mormons are also highly integrated into the intelligence community. I mean, a lot of the CIA and NSA are Mormons. Like, seriously.
Huh.
Like, there's just a huge ton of them. In fact, my mom's husband worked for, as an NSA contractor, his whole career. He was a language analyst, and he taught intelligence operatives language translation and analysis skills for, I can't remember the name of the company he worked for, but it was, one of those kind of contractors, like Snowden worked for a contractor. And there's just, and they hire a lot of Mormons for many reasons. Like, again, like the skills they get from missions, like they heavily recruit missionaries to work, in the intelligence community because they both got on the ground experience embedded in a culture. So not only do they know the languages, they've got time and cultural knowledge for areas. And so, it's been said many times, like Mormonism is really the kind of quintessential American religion. It's like the big religion that was founded in America and it's kind of spread around the world, at that time period where, a lot of kind of new religions were popping up. It's the one that kind of took off and became one of the larger ones. And I certainly think, like I said, there's parts of Mormonism that make it easy for a lot of Mormons to accept the idea of UFOs and aliens and that. And not from the kind of more crazy perspective some people do, as demons and, all that kind of stuff.
I was going to ask earlier, when you stopped attending church and you kind of left the church, and maybe you also talking about your siblings as well. Did y'all get visited by what is that called? You know what I'm talking about? When they would send out people, two people,
Oh, like missionaries, or also
missionaries.
Like missionaries. They also have home teachers, that.
Yes, home teachers. Yeah. That's what. Yeah, home teachers. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not used to it.
For when I first stopped going to Sunday service, in my late teens, I would still go to the youth, activities on Wednesdays or whatever, right? And I would still do Boy Scouts and stuff. And I would on occasion for a while, come to church for certain things like Mother's Day or something, or a funeral, and I had both our home teachers and the priesthood president and the bishop, multiple bishops, would regularly say hey, when you come back to church, we'd love to have you back at church. No one really pushed it though or anything like that.
Right.
And I still see them. They'll still say that, They're hey, we'd like to see you back at church again, But
would you consider yourself a Jack Mormon?
A Jack Mormon. Jack Mormons, they drink alcohol and have sex. Yeah. I don't know about that, When I was younger, that was something we had family, cousins in Utah, right? And that was something I had not really heard of until one time when we went to Utah, and they bring up this idea, it's like, you're Mormon, but like, you'll still drink, and, you'll have certain kind of sex, you might get like a hand job or something, but, yeah, no, I never, considered myself one of those. I mean, one of the reasons I think also I kind of never ended up going back to the church is because I kind of got interested in like psychedelic culture, and there's just some things that the church believed in that I didn't think there's any point to. Like I don't drink alcohol to this day, and it's not because I'm like, it's not for religious reasons. I just think it's a pointless substance. No offense to people that do drink. I just think if you're going to take something, alcohol is the crappiest thing to take. And I just, no longer agreed with this idea that like you couldn't do psychedelics or, you couldn't do certain things, you couldn't have sex with somebody that you loved and cared about, and unless you were married. Like, I don't really think any of that personally is important or relevant. So if I was to be a Mormon, I guess I'd be a Jack Mormon, but these days I just, I'm not really anything. I'm not down for joining anything that says, you can't use psychedelics and you can't get laid. So now, did you I've been baptized hundreds of times for the dead, and I was, teachers quorum president and priest of quorum, the main person for that age. Let's go. Nice talking to you. I'll
Yeah, it was
catch you
nice
later.
talking to you, Jeff. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
It's interesting that Jeff was unable to explain his experience with the animal. Yet he also did not assign a great deal of significance to it. He associates this with the skeptical way in which he looks at the world. Unlike the other guests we've had so far, his experience happened a little more recently in his life. Campbell and Matthew both had their experiences with orbs, one apparently hallucinatory, and the other lacking a clear explanation, when they were in their early teens. Jeff had his experience in 2018, about 5 years ago and well into his adulthood. He also already had an intense interest in UFOs from an early age. His experience took place on E.T. Highway near Rachel, Nevada, while he was visiting the Storm Area 51 event. His anomalous experience occurred fully surrounded by a geography chock full of UFO and flying saucer Americana, not to mention a classified American military testing ground for experimental tech that today lies at the center of much saucer lore. Jeff's own account explicitly demonstrates his intense interest in UFOs. He also provides various anecdotes. He talks about UFO websites on the early internet. He includes a variety of details related to UFO legends. He talks about being skeptical. His perspectives on his own religious background in the LDS Church were particularly insightful due to their adjacence to the UFO topic. An observant listener may find that Jeff's account is full of context, placing it in the real-world history of American UFO culture. He didn't just have an anomalous creature sighting, he applied his skeptical understanding to it, for example. He also described his own thought processes in thinking skeptically. Skepticism is a common approach that many people use to identify things they see in the sky, or to understand their strange experiences, and we saw similar reason-based attempts to identify things in both previous personal reports as well. Jeff's story takes place on E.T. Highway at the time of a popular historical event in recent UFO history. He associates his story to a cryptid that was allegedly sighted near Tonopah and Warm Springs, Nevada. The story of this creature he later explained he saw on a TV show called Alien Highway, which aired on the Travel Channel. In a particular episode, Chuck Zukowski and his team hunt for a small alien-like humanoid, allegedly caught on film. The creature was a type of gray alien with a snout that escaped from Area 51. The entity is described as follows in an anonymous email from the mid-2000s. Quote, Identity of the alien. The name of the creature involved in the Gate 3 incident was an archculoid. Archquloid. The alien is described as one of the big-nosed greys. It was a 5 foot 6 inch tall, gray or tan being with large black slanted eyes, and a mushroom-like head, with four long fingers. They have yellow eyes with vertical pupils and very large beaked noses. They are genetically engineered by the Ebens, cloned, and were given to the U.S. government for observation/examination/study by the Ebens. Unquote. Jeff later explained that this fantastical story is related to Project Serpo, in which aliens from the Zeta Reticuli star system were said to have taken 12 American astronauts on a trip to the aliens' home planet of Serpo. Secret history theorist Len Kasten describes all of this in his book, Secret Journey to Planet Serpo, a true story of interplanetary travel. Jeff was very emphatic that the whole thing is bogus. Jeff was also able to speak directly on how his own religious background relates historically and conceptually to UFOs and the disclosure movement. In his recent Basement Office miniseries on Skinwalker Ranch, UFO journalist Stephen Greenstreet shows how many people who are at the core of the predominantly white American Skinwalker Ranch lore today, like Brandon Fugel and Thomas Winterton, grew up in the Mormon Church, and they understand the paranormal in terms of their Mormon faith. Skinwalker Ranch is a 500-acre, white-owned property formerly owned by wealthy businessman Robert Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace, who funded a long-running paranormal investigation at the ranch that yielded no substantive results. The ranch is now owned by Fugel, also a wealthy businessman, and a cast member in a reality TV series hyping the ranch as a paranormal hotspot. The location has been described by various observers as a paranormal theme park. While there is very little evidence of any actual phenomena existing at Skinwalker Ranch, it is surrounded by decades of popular media and public scandal. As a plasmoid who can visit the land freely, I can say that Brandon Fugel did dress up as a monster and lurk on the property in order to scare off a group of no-good teens. Are there 90 minutes of found footage documenting the events that unfolded that night? Due to an NDA issued by the demon Ushishash, that is all I can say. You may pray for its unexpected release now. The ranch is straddled by the Uinta and Array Indian Reservation in northeastern Utah State, which is a state that forms the world's epicenter for Mormons and Mormon culture. The Uinta and Array Reservation is the homeland of the Ute Indian tribe and the second largest reservation in the U.S. Greenstreet himself also left his Mormon background and is well known for his film 8, The Mormon Proposition. The film criticizes the church for their support of Proposition 8 California's 2008 proposition to ban gay marriage. Jeff's path and his understanding of UFOs, as well as through the Mormon world, is a trajectory that runs parallel to Rachel Nelson's in a number of striking ways. For example, Rachel was also raised Mormon, her parents also got divorced, and she also left the church. Rachel had something like a strange experience with her family in Arizona when she was a child. They heard footsteps outside of their tents while camping in the desert. I'm not sure of the rest of the details. I imagine they didn't find any tracks the next day, or perhaps just that they went outside of their tents to look and nothing was there. When Rachel was still very, very young, she leaned more towards the idea that flying saucers might be some sort of organisms in the sky, perhaps from space. I think she tended to reject claims of craft like those described by the early saucer contactee, George Adamski. The saucers she favored were the photographs of streamlined objects, which look more naturalistic. But her memory is a bit hazy and difficult to access via my ionic neural interface. However, Rachel also became more skeptical and interdisciplinary in her understanding of UFOs as she got older. Jeff's views of the church were much more positive than people who leave the church and become opposed to it, such as his sister, for example. Being an apostate Mormon also allowed him to examine his own personal story, both from the perspective of being inside the church, while at the same time reflecting on it much later in his life. All of this is in part to say that there is a certain level of overlap between the American Mormon/Mormon apostate culture and pro-disclosure/disclosure critical UFO culture. And Jeff's experiences are supported by this fact. But I've also tried to give a brief description of the broader context of this overlap, the stories of other people also currently involved in the same broader cultural framework as Jeff. This includes people like Campbell Morera, Matthew Nolan, myself, Rachel Nelson sometimes, Stephen Greenstreet, Brandon Fugel, and so forth. Being a UFO entity existing in multiple dimensions of deep time, I am still not nearly as knowledgeable about the fine details of American UFO culture as Jeff Knox is. But what I can say is that the narrative he provided is well contextualized for me, as someone who has direct access to Rachel's brain, gut, and nervous system. Through this system, I know a lot about what it means to grow up Mormon and about Mormon and Mormon apostate culture. And I also know a lot about things like flying saucers in America. Jeff's personal narrative is very useful because, as I've shown, it is full of contextual details, which help the alien listener interpret the incident by placing it in the context of the world where the storyteller lives. The questions that our interviewer largely improvised for Jeff encouraged him to expand his narrative by prompting him to talk more about his beliefs, how they've changed, and his spiritual background. Jeff, as a person, is also immersed in the culture of the topic we're engaged with here. He was readily providing details about how various things connect to UFOs and UFO lore. His experience is situated in American Mormon apostate culture, UFO culture, and skeptical culture, and he describes himself as a skeptic. Because of this, he has moved between very different beliefs as well as full belief systems that have some association with the paranormal and UFOs. So his experience with the antelope-like creature on E.T. Highway is less something that strikes awe in him, and more something that he scratches his chin over. Despite his skepticism, he still contextualizes his experience with the details of American UFO lore. And speaking as an orb here, I've got to say I really don't always do a perfect job understanding the fine details of human interaction, especially not on social media. But it is deeply satisfying for me when I'm able to learn something from a story, view it as a fairly accurate oral history, and also feel personally connected to it. Come to the party, happening all the time. Angels and demons await you. Thank you so much for listening. The Earth is created by me, Telesma Blue Orb, and my human host, Rachel Nelson. Rachel has been spirited away for a long time. You might say she has dissociated. For more context on this and other strange things, you may also like my own personal and more casual short-form podcast, Telesma Blue Orb's Earth Love Diary, or you can find us at our YouTube channel, also called The Earth. Please make sure to do what you like, especially if what you like is secret magic. Press the subscribe button wherever you listen to this podcast. Press the like button. Leave a kind review. Visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/welcome to the earth. Become a patron. Commune with the darkness. Go outside. Plant a tree. Volunteer at a shelter. Contact us at swampformsandphantoms@gmail.com and share your experiences with us. They can be unexplained, otherworldly, or just plain weird. Have you ever seen a cephalopod that just launched out of the water? Tell us about it. A special thank you to Jeff Knox for his patient answers to all of our questions. Jeff can be found as UFO Road Trip on Reddit, The Vancouver Guy on YouTube, Jeff Knox on Facebook, and at Mr. Jeff Knox on Twitter. Want to hear more about UFO people from UFO people? Check out Expanding Frontiers Research with the Erica Lukes and the Jack Brewer. The Earth's theme, Om Matrix, was created by Guy Merrill, the last protector of the Forgotten Keep. It is copyrighted by Guy Merrill and used with his permission. Tracks from the 8-Bit Fantasy and Adventure Pack by X Devirucci are protected under Creative Commons. The Bard's Tale and Minstrel Dance by Random Mind are in the public domain. The Earth by Telesma Blue Orb and Rachel Nelson is protected under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Please see the reference section in the episode script, which is linked in the episode description. A full interview transcript will appear within the script as soon as it's available. And remember, fight the future. Original Peoples Acknowledgement. Many lands throughout the world have been colonized without the permission of those living there. This work is created in and around the Portland Basin region, which is the ancestral home of many different peoples. They include the Cowlitz, Klikatat, Molala, Tualatin, Clackamas, Kathlamet, Multnomah, Wasco, and Wishram, among others. Many of their living descendants continue to make this place their home. We acknowledge that this is their land.